Good morning and welcome to EnerCom's The Oil and Gas Conference 25. I'm Aaron Vandeford, president of EnerCom. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to across the world to our conference this year. Certainly we are in interesting times and wish we were gathering here in Denver as we do every August to share good ideas, bring capital markets together. But we still have that same aspirations, and I think our team has done just that this year. And so I look forward to an exciting next couple of days. I will go ahead and start off a little bit of a presentation and give some housekeeping notes here. All attendees, when you guys come in, you guys will be in a listen-only mode. With some of the presentations throughout the next 3 days, we will have time at the end. Not all the presentations, some are fireside chat, but there will be time for Q&A. Certainly, if you would like to ask a question during those times, please submit the Q&A through the Q&A tool in Zoom. Presenters will answer questions. There will be an EnerCom person to help facilitate those as we go through. The live presentation link that you're on right now will continue to be the same link throughout the day, with one exception tomorrow. With our Haynes and Boone Energy Tracker call in the morning, everyone will be able to stay on the same link throughout the entire presentation. If there are technical issues that you need help with, please email Blanca Andrus at bandrus@enercominc.com, and she will help facilitate getting that question to the right folks. Likewise, we have one-on-one meetings, hundreds of one-on-one meetings over the next couple of days. And if you guys are having any issues or technical difficulties, I know you guys have all been communicating with Tyler Jones, but please feel free to email Tyler at tjones@enercominc.com. And now with the housekeeping out of the way, welcome to our 25th anniversary. So how did we get here? This is 25 years in the making. Certainly want to review a little bit of the history of the conference. EnerCom, as most of you know, is an energy consulting firm. It's 26 years in business. We do consulting and analytics. We do branding and marketing with our companies. And we certainly have our Oil and Gas 360 platform and our conferences. And so that was bred out of our consulting work with our clients asking, how do we get into, how can you guys help us get in front of our target market? And so our first conference, kind of fun. EnerCom had 2 employees, 8 presenting companies, some fun names in here. So Bob Boswell, I know, is registered for the conference this year. Newfield, certainly FX Energy, many of these guys and folks still around. Key Production, which is a iteration of Cimarex, which we'll be presenting later this year. And it was hosted in Denver, in the Denver Petroleum Club. That first year, and these are slides here, and I'll show you, companies had to come in to the conference room with their slides, and this is key production company's slide deck from that first year. And so when we think about where we've come entering with slides to where we are today over a Zoom environment, we're still putting those ideas together, but we've kept up with technology. A little bit more, year 2, certainly everyone knows that baseball is certainly fundamental to our conference. That's when we had our first baseball game, and we're excited to have the Rockies doing what they're doing this year and look forward to next year when we can actually be there in person. Year 3, we started playing golf. I'm happy to report that I was able to go out to Arrowhead this year and golf with some friends and have some laughs still. So I wish we could have done it with more, but I still was able to get out there. Year 5, we started doing a presentation, and so I'll get into some of our views, but we take an approach on where the industry is. Year 8, first Derek Wells. I know this is a question we've gotten a lot. Look forward to having our 25th anniversary Derek Wells out there for our next year conference. And then as of today, the Oil and Gas Conference is a place where we have good investment ideas. The capital markets and the industry gather every August, and this year's no different. So with that, a few trends to pay attention to as we work through the conference this year. Certainly the North American capital cycle is front and center. And I think of these wedges as something where they contract and expand. And so we raise debt and equity. We have actually seen a little bit of movement in some of this, but for the most part, we're being asked to work within cash flow. We have capital allocation. These decisions are of the utmost importance, and reinvest in generate returns and distribute. And so as you think about all of the presentations today, whether it be from a technology company to an E&P, this decision is front and center, and you'll get a good window into each of these components of the North American capital cycle. By the way of numbers, if we take a look at what this actually means, we can see during the last downturn in the 2015-16 timeframe, the equity offerings to the tune of $42 billion in 2016 were there to help support and prop up. This year, even starting ahead of a COVID environment, 2019, the equity markets were essentially closed. We've actually seen year to date more equity offerings this year than we have all in the entirety of last year, and most of those going to royalty companies and others where we feel, and maybe some natural gas. So that's one of the areas where there's a little bit of some light, and certainly M&A is going to be something to think about as we go forward here. And so we've been down this path before. Certainly cycles are nothing new to us, and we kind of follow these three phases. We have the survival phase where we cut production, drop investment, and we've done that for the most part. We've hit a bottom in rig counts, and we're now in this inflection phase where inventories peak, the least fit producers engage in capital restructuring, and that's happening across the board. And we're positioning ourselves for the next multiple of years. And there may be another boom, but I think really Harold Hamm put it, who spoke at lunch last year, in an article that I read today, that really we're looking for sustainable, good economics rather than another boom going forward. And I think that resonates for all of these presentations going forward. And certainly as we think about a regeneration phase, we're getting there. And so let's start thinking about what that regeneration looked like and some of the themes that go in there. And so a market in distress can create opportunity. And this is a chart that I stopped before we went down into the negative pricing. But as we march down into lower and lower prices, I've mapped that against average break-even prices that we run in our analytics. And we continue to find prices bump down, and continually energy companies get better and better and better. And so it's no coincidence that we're close to that $40 price level, which is about a PV10 break even, as we're working through this next phase. One of the major trends that we will see, and we'll have a tremendous panel this afternoon, is on ESG. It'll be a topic of conversation not only in the panel, but across many of our presentations. Some of the things that we found in our consulting work on ESG is that this is really more than just a cost of capital issue. It may really be an access to capital issue. And it's no surprise that ESG is increasing with the oil and gas industry and the conversation. What we found is there's a growing number of investors and employees of varying degrees that are looking at employing these ESG valuation metrics. So in our panel this afternoon, we will hear from a buy-side person actually working on these ESG valuations. We'll hear from a E&P operator. We will hear from the folks at University of Denver who are actually working on some of the accounting principles to this. And we'll also hear from one of our sponsors, David Pring, about how we are placing senior management and board levels and things that we're thinking there. Certainly from an environmental perspective, VOCs, methane emissions, and CO2 will be a constant theme as we work through this conference, and it will be a constant theme as we think about the future of our industry. One of the things that we have found is that both the E, the S, and the G are weighted equally. And though we get a lot of press on the environmental side, and we have to talk a lot about it, know that the S and the G are equally as important and weighted in investment decisions based on our analysis. just to support some of that, looking at the top 5 ESG funds, according to Barron's at the beginning of this year, you know, just taking some quotes out of what they're looking at, it's not a whole cut out fossil fuels. One of the top picks for Matthew is Range Resources. And really, as we think about some of these other quotes, it's really looking for long-term investment opportunities, sustainability, and that most of these funds are going in and doing their own work on each of the companies. And I think that should be encouraging to folks and to management teams as we were going through here, as there's an opportunity to join that dialogue and to make sure that you're telling your story. And so I appreciate everyone being here this week to help do that. One of the other major themes is a belief that there's a wave of mergers and acquisitions and some consolidation to happen throughout the space. We've started to see that some with the Southwestern and even starting before that with the PDC deal. But consolidation doesn't necessarily mean contraction. Those assets end up in another company. We get size and scale, which is needed for this free cash flow model. And I always remind folks that every transaction requires investment. And so those are encouraging things as well, because every transaction requires a return. And so we got to make sure we're getting these at fair prices and that we're generating returns. Certainly, it'll be less of a topic of discussion with our folks that are here today, but industry trends of bankruptcies, there will be more. It doesn't necessarily mean that these companies are dead. There will be common issues coming out of bankruptcy that these companies will have to deal with, rebuilding trust. You've got capital structures, so debt holders that are in unfamiliar territory, owning equity. There'll be limited liquidity. And so these are all things that again, create opportunity for the right-minded investor to think about what are these assets, what is this new management team, maybe a new board of directors in there, and what are the real opportunities as we move forward here. MiFID II, which is regulations coming out of Europe, is certainly not just stayed over in Europe. This is speaking a little bit to the way that we think about corporate access, and it changes the landscape of how we tell companies, and is certainly exacerbated in a cycle like we're having here in the energy space. And so as I think about companies coming to our conference, certainly we've been MiFID II compliant for a long time, but I think that this is also a home for all types of companies, whether you're a national oil company on through to a startup. MiFID II will affect each of those differently, and we've kind of had a home here with that. And I think that this is something that we will have to keep an eye on. Politics matter as well, and we need to talk about it. And so I'll come back to the need to talk about it, because we're going to have some discussions here at our conference. But this is just a little bit of a highlight of the first Biden energy plan that he intended to roll out, looking towards 100% clean energy and zero emissions no later than 2050. And certainly, as we think about that as the backdrop, what does this mean for the oil and gas industry? And I use a couple of these quotes that we've seen out there. There's a lot of room for the oil and gas industry in today's plan, according to Matt. And, you know, there's some common ground here from the API. And certainly, you know, I think there's investment that needs to be taken from an LNG perspective. And so I think Sharif shares that. And we got comfort that, at least in the first iteration, that a Biden presidency may not be an immediate day one fracking plan, but we need to also make sure that this day one type of idea and energy thinks about for the long term. And so depending on which way we go, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat in office next year, or in 4 years, or 8 years, or many years down the road, we need to be, as an industry, very much involved in talking about what works for the industry, because we will be around. And I'll share a little bit of an example here, but just based on the fundamentals, our infrastructure, and what the oil and gas industry is able to do, we will continue to be a part of that dialogue and an important piece of it. And so, a little bit of math here. There is a cost to going 100% green. And I use this example to show where we are in our life cycle if 100% green is in our future. And so converting to 100% solar power for the US electricity consumption, here's where we are in real life. In 2018, consumption was 4.1 trillion kilowatt hours. The Topaz solar field in California, owned by Berkshire Hathaway, covers 4,700 acres and produces at about 27% capacity, or roughly 143 megawatt or million watts at a cost of 2.4 billion to build. And so if we extrapolate that out for what it would take to meet US's electrical supply and generation demand for 2018, notwithstanding that it's growing from solar, this equates to about 137 million acres, or the size of all of California and most of Oregon covered with solar panels. And certainly we reach out and think about the folks in California that are having rolling blackouts today. And I think is a reminder of the importance of a strong electrical grid and the dependence on good, clean energy. The last part of this is we would need more than 29,000 plants to do that, and a cost of 70 trillion. And so I use this as an example to say we've got a long way to go for that to be there. And it also means that oil and gas must be responsible in the way that we move forward and a part of that discussion. And so let me just take a couple minutes here and think about the view from the EnerCom windshield. As I think about ESG, it's here to stay. Encourage everyone at this conference and certainly beyond to join the dialogue, whether you're on the capital market side, the operating side. It's a deal that we all have to make sure that we are talking about. Companies have been doing good ESG for a long time. I think we are now in a position where we need to make sure that people know about it. The oil and gas industry is also here to stay. And we must not forget the math on where we are and not also be overly dependent upon that math and understand where the change may be coming from. But we must make sure that we take realistic steps in moving forward. And certainly, as always, and even more so in this environment, cash is king and returns are key. And I think the things in our rearview mirror, certainly in the near term, are $100 oil, the business model of buying, proving up and flipping, and the grow at any cost. I really think that as we think about the messaging that we've had and the real change in where we are today and as an industry, we have that responsibility. So let's take a look at what we're going to be doing here in the next little bit. So EnerCom's conference, we were all in a digital environment this year, and we're all a part of this conversation this week on the future of the energy industry. And so thank you again for being here. We've got a global audience. We've got investors from Argentina, Australia, Austria, Canada, Colombia, Denmark, Germany, Hong Kong, Norway, Qatar, the UK, and the good old US of A. And so it really is in that spirit of bringing everyone together. That's what we're doing here in August. We've got a tremendous amount of content. We've got 5+ hours of presentations from industry leaders, innovators, and experts over the next 3 days. And I'll certainly encourage you all to also go to our on-demand page on the front of our conference website for some pre-recorded presentations that just some are on the schedule, but in addition to what we could fill in the 3 days, we have some awesome things out there. We've got presentations and we've did some pre-recording. We were in Colombia. Later this week, we will also have a presentation from Norway. We've got folks that have international assets from South America on through to across the globe. We're going to hear from the Bakken, the Eagle Ford, DJ Basin, all of the major basins. And I'm really excited to have many operators from our friends to the north in Canada. We did a Montney panel. That's one of the things on the on-demand. I would encourage everyone, as we think about that Montney play in Canada, to go look at that Montney panel, it was eye-opening to me to go through that and think about some of the economics. Certainly oilfield service, public and private. We're going to have panel discussions on ESG. We've got a midstream panel. We have a government politics panel that is just awesome. And so as we think about this conference and where we need to be as an industry, we need to talk about it. So we need to talk about it at our conference. And so we've got a great government panel on Wednesday. And certainly I mentioned the Montney panel. This afternoon, we will have our energy tech and incubator sessions. These are earlier stage companies that are leading the way. These are mostly companies that are all past proof of concept, have first revenue, and some have been able to even raise money during this COVID time, which I think speaks to the importance of the work that they're doing. Certainly, we'll think about what the next wave of energy companies are looking at. And so I encourage you all to take part in those presentations as they give their 15-minute pitch on what they're doing, and we'll have a nice Q&A tomorrow morning, first thing live with each of those folks. We're going to have a tremendous amount of fundamental analysis with folks and other industry experts. So right after this, Bernadette Johnson with Enverus will be giving her opinion. So I look forward to that. And certainly we will have one-on-one meetings throughout the event, and an important dialogue will continue. I can't end without saying thank you. And certainly to our sponsors on the left-hand side of the slide, to the Netherlands Schools, the Moss Adams, Enverus, CAC, Haynes and Boone, Pring, PNC, Rystad, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo. Your support during this time has been incredible. So a heartfelt thank you to all of you. And also to the presenters. This is just an amazing lineup for this year. And lastly, they're not on this slide, but they're all around me, my team this year. Thank you. With that, we'll get going with the conference.